Right. So welcome to another episode of GH Movie Freaks Hot Take with Asankomah. And I'm not going to bore you with the introduction. As you already know, the African Cinema Summit was held a couple of weeks ago. I think about 2 weeks ago. And personally, I didn't want to make any videos, or I didn't really want to comment on the African Cinema Summit. But I chanced on a video from a senior journalist, somebody that I consider a senior in the space, because he's taught me a few things over the years that I'm very grateful for. I saw a comment from him in reaction to the African Cinema Summit, and I've seen several other comments that I just couldn't hold back on. So I decided to make a hot take or react to his take on the African Cinema Summit. And yeah, I'm sure many of you have already seen the clip, but if you haven't seen the clip, let's just dive right in.
Last week, the second edition of the Africa Cinema Summit was held right here in Ghana. And this is a scheme that is put together by the National Film Authority of Ghana. It's a platform for filmmakers in Africa to come together to think about how to move the industries in the African region in terms of film forward. So Ghana is the one spearheading this project.
So I'm going to be reacting to some of the things he says along the way.
I've seen some people make disparaging comments about the summit. Some people saying that it's not important. Other people also saying that it's actually pointless for Ghana to hold an event like this for the whole of Africa. They believe.
Okay, so let me start with this one. Yeah, I've also seen the comment, also like seen people or engaged or spoken to people that feel like the idea of the African Cinema Summit is needless and that we do not need an African Cinema Summit. And it's essentially, to many, it's just another talk shop, which a lot of people feel that way about the African Cinema Summit, and they're entitled to feel so. And I can understand why they feel so, because for so many years in the Ghanaian film space, you've had so many conversations, you've had so many platforms where people go to talk, and it is as though nothing really changes, right? So I can understand it when people feel or people approach the African Cinema Summit what's it going to change, right? I can understand when people do that. But the fact still remains, such conversations are important, such platforms are needed. We cannot rule out the need for us to have constantly conversations about things that can improve our film space. We cannot count that out. We cannot sit back and say, okay, because nothing really is changing, let's be silent. We cannot sit back and say, because nothing really has improved, let's not have any more conversations. Let's just fold our arms and then sit on our asses and expect a miracle to happen. So to me, if you'd ask me, I would say yes, an event platform or a situation or whatever, however you want to term it, like the African Cinema Summit is important. But yes, I do understand when people have their resentment or have their own reservations about it.
That we have so many other needs that require immediate attention than focusing on a summit that is for the entire African country region.
I've also heard this. A lot of people say that, oh, we don't need an African Cinema Summit. But here's the funny thing: if you speak to most Ghanaian filmmakers and ask them what really is the problem or what they believe the Ghanaian film industry needs, a lot of them would double back and land on funding, because to many people that is the biggest problem that we have in our industry. Okay, to many of our creatives, they always go back to the issue of lack of funding, and government needs to invest in our industry, and we need investors. But I always have this question to ask: after you've got the investment, what happens to the product? What happens when you've done the movie, when you shot the movie? How do we make the money back from the movie? Okay, what happens after you shot that $1 million film? Is that it? That $1 million has to be made back. And how does that happen? So to me, and I've maintained and I've spoken about this over the years, that I believe that the biggest problem that we have, particularly in our Ghanaian film space, is top of the list will be distribution. I feel like we are at a huge deficit when it comes to selling our product, which is the film. And any conversation for me that leads us back to finding solutions to solve that problem, I'm in support of it. Because even with the little that in terms of financing or investments that our creative have, we have some amazing films, but they are not seen by that many people, so they do not necessarily translate into the impression or what seems like a thriving industry. And I believe one of the key ways to solve this is for us to have effective modern day distribution solutions for our film industry. And any conversation, in my opinion, that leads us towards that, I'm in support of it.
My first take on their posture is that if we really want change, then we cannot do without capacity building. A lot of the people in this industry, they don't like learning, they don't want to broaden their scope in their fields. They're always happy and content with being in their small spaces. So people in this creative industry do not want to learn. A lot of us are ignorant just because we hate to learn. Some of our creatives think the only way to grow this industry, this sector, is to be gathered in one room where somebody in power comes to us and share monies to us to go take care of ourselves and our family.
Bro, I can agree like 1000% on this, that a lot of our industry people are scared of, taking the bold step to learn. And it's not necessarily learning. In this case, does not necessarily mean going back to school or, taking up a film class. But I believe it also includes having all these conversations or being a part of these conversations to at least learn and unlearn. Because in these conversations or platforms that allow for conversations to be had around our film industry, there's always something to be learned. Personally, I always say that every day is film school for me, because any material, any podcast, any radio or TV show that has something to do with the film industry, I'm interested in listening because I believe that I will learn one or two things from it. And that's true. Many of our creatives are not thinking along those lines. And I agree 1000% with Kwame Dazi when he says that for many of our creatives, they believe that the real change for our industry is if some politician or some government official calls us or calls them in particular into certain spaces and starts handing them cash to go and produce. And we've seen that happen a couple of times in this country. We've seen situations where, there's some, a very good example was around the COVID time where it's being told or it's being, put out there that government assisted some creatives around that time. And top of my head till date, I can't pinpoint one single production or one single film or TV series or whatever that a creative can say, oh, the government money that was given to us around that time was used for this production. Even if there are, we haven't seen it. And it's because, again, back to what I believe is our biggest problem, we do not have distribution channels. So what happens if government gives us money? What happens if government has a grant that allows you to access $1 million to shoot a film here in Ghana? What happens to the film after that? How are you going to sell the film? Let's go on.
Or maybe go fund our film projects. So it's always about we getting money from government or powers that be. That is the only way, the only parameters we use in judging how far we are going as a people. But I think that if you really want to grow, you need to learn. People from about 20 African countries, they were right here in this country, Ghana, last week for the Africa Cinema Summit. They took part in the summit. Meanwhile, a lot of our people in the filmmaking sector were absent.
So here's the thing, right? Anybody that knows the Ghanaian film space knows that the people that you would consider the face of the industry do not show up for they show up for some gatherings, but they do not show up for gatherings that I believe are geared towards advancing or developing the space. They are always busy around that time. It's very interesting. And I think if you speak to people on the other side, which is the music industry, they would also say the same. That people that are considered, and when I say people that are considered the face, I'm talking about the people that the average Ghanaian would see walking down the street and recognize as an actor or recognize as a television star or recognize as, a director. Most of these people don't show up for film festivals, even for town hall meetings, talk shops, whatever, talk parties. They don't show up. They are just not interested. To them, it's it's just not a space that they want to be in. And interestingly, they are always busy around those times. And I mean, you can't fault them if you are shooting a film around the time that the African Cinema Summit is happening. I do not expect that you drop the film and then come to the summit. You already have a shooting schedule, or if you are shooting, let me not focus even on the African Cinema Summit. Let's talk about the Black Star International Film Festival, or even let's talk about the Accra Indie Film Festival, for instance. Around that time, you would hardly see any person that you would consider, rarely would you see anybody that you would consider as part of the face of the Ghanaian film industry.
Of them did not attend the summit. This is an attitude that I think is killing the industry.
I agree.
It even translates into the choice of radio content that we listen to. So instead of people listening to progressive content on Showbiz A to Z, they would rather tune into some other, places where they are playing the sensational card over there. That is what attracts them. We don't want to learn. As a people in this industry, we hate to learn. Now, another thing is the NFA is the one that organizes the summit. Some people think that it's not right for them to have done that. So who should have organized an Africa Cinema Summit? Somebody from Nigeria?
Who should have organized an African Cinema Summit? I think, again, this is a very conversation-worthy topic that I can understand when people speak up and say, why is the National Film Authority organizing a summit when there are so many other things that the National Film Authority should be doing? I can understand when people who are paying attention to the Ghanaian film industry and understand the struggles that the Ghanaian film industry is going through says that they do not feel that the National Film Authority should be focusing on a summit, but should rather be focusing on other things that they believe falls within the mandate of the National Film Authority. But here's the thing, and not to hold brief for the National Film Authority, ever since they've been established, they've maintained that their core mandate is to create an enabling environment for Ghanaian films, or for the Ghanaian film industry to thrive. And every action that they've taken over the years, they would argue that they are making or taking those actions to help create that enabling environment for the Ghanaian film industry. From the Shoot in Ghana campaign to the presidential pitch series to everything that the National Film Authority has done over the years that they've been in existence, they would argue that they are doing that to create an enabling environment for the Ghanaian film industry. So the question again, who should organize the African Cinema Summit? I can confidently tell you that it will be difficult for anybody, any private institution to hold or put together a summit that turned out as successful or as, in many ways, as impactful or conversation worthy as what we've seen done by the NFA last 2 weeks and then the previous year. Because I have an event called GH MovieCon and I've done 3 editions and I've not been able to do it again because of the financial challenge that event poses. People think that it's a walk in a park to organize any event in a Ghanaian space, particularly an event where you would have to look for people to sponsor. So I can understand that it will be challenging for anybody to hold or pull together an event as successful as what the NFA did at the African Cinema Summit last 2 weeks, and again what they did last year. Because they are a government institution, I mean, they can essentially go over any obstacle, over any barricade that has been placed in front of them to be able to pull the summit off. But if you are going to argue that it shouldn't be the priority of the NFA, I can understand. But then again, who should do it? I can understand also that people feel like it shouldn't be a focus of the NFA. But then again, if an individual like me with a company called Escape Digital Consult decides to hold an African Cinema Summit, are you going to attend? Really? Are you honestly going to attend GH MovieCon because it's Tony Asankomah that organized it? Even if the conversations or even if the outcome of that convention or that event is going to be double of what, or even 10 times what we've seen by the African Cinema Summit, are you really going to attend? So I think the case really isn't about who is organizing the African Cinema Summit. Ideally, I also would agree to people that say that the NFA should have rather enabled a third party or rather focused on the key things they are supposed to focus on and allowed a third-party institution to organize the summit and then thrown their weight behind it. For instance, I've said this to several people. The African Cinema Summit is to me, everything that GH MovieCon should be. right? Except that I can't afford to pull GH MovieCon off on that scale. It's the truth. I tried. I went broke. I went broke after the last edition, even though I had help from partners and one or two sponsors. I still went broke because it's not a joke, right? So who should organize the African Cinema Summit? Should Nigerians organize it? Again, if a Nigerian organized it and chose to organize it in Nigeria, this is a question I have for Ghanaian creatives. Are you going to take it serious then? Are you going to attend? Or you are going to say, oh, it's a Nigerian thing, and going to sit back and say, why is this not happening in Ghana? And Ghanaians are not serious. Is that going to be the approach? Because I feel like a lot of us are not being very honest about some of these things, right? And maybe it is a Ghanaian thing, or it's generally like our way we look at things or how we approach things. But if it must be done, it must be done well. I think it's going to be challenging for anybody to pull off an event as successful as what the National Film Authority did with the African Cinema Summit. I myself, I feel challenged by it. I feel inspired by it. But I'm not going to kid myself. It's not going to be easy. And here's the truth. Regardless of how we see this, the Africa Cinema Summit does make the NFA look good. Maybe that might be their intention. Maybe that might be their focus, to put something together, put a spectacle together that makes them look busy, that puts them in the eyeballs of the average Ghanaian, or even the eyeballs of the government to show that, okay, they're a government institution and they are working, right? It makes them look good. And you can understand from a certain perspective if that is what they want to go for, that they want to look busy, or they want to create the impression or make waves or make their presence felt to the African Cinema Summit. You can understand that, and you can't fault them for that. But it's important that whilst we sit back and say somebody else should have done this event, we still hold the NFA accountable and expect that what is expected of them must be done.
South Africa, Uganda. You know, there are events across the continent. AFRIMA, we have AMA Awards, which is the Africa Movie Academy Awards, which is in Nigeria. This is an award scheme for the African continent, which started in Nigeria. It is held in Nigeria. Ghanaians take part in this award. Sometimes we win awards and we are happy. Why don't we also pride ourselves in the fact that we are championing something for Africa from Ghana? Why do we ask questions like, why is Ghana organizing a summit for Africa?
Anybody that asks that question, I don't know. I don't know how you feel about yourself. Again, here's the thing. One of the reasons why I decided to do the event GH MovieCon was because I felt like in the 12 months that encompass a year, the film industry in Ghana is virtually silent. There's nothing. There's crickets. It's almost as though there's nothing really going on when it comes to the Ghanaian film industry within the year. And I felt that having one big event, at least at the start of the year, that sort of like puts the Ghanaian film industry into perspective. Having people who are not even like film fans paying attention to the film industry and saying, oh, let's look at what these guys are doing. They are up to something, or get excited about what they want to see within the year. It's good. It's a good look for our industry. And then it opens our industry to other markets as well, because they would want to know, okay, that event went on in that country. Let's go and take a look. But it's nothing for our film industry. There's nothing that happens in our film industry that is exciting, that brings people in. So how is that wrong if you have a summit that has the potential of bringing other filmmakers from across the world or across Africa to want to come to Ghana and pay attention to our industry, bring eyeballs to our industry? How is that wrong? As a matter of fact, I would have loved for GH MovieCon to be that event that is bringing people to Ghana to come and experience Ghanaian filmmaking, or bring people to Ghana to come and have conversations in relation to the growth of cinema in Africa. But what do we see, or what are we hearing now? So who should hold the African Cinema Summit?
Do you rather wish that somebody from, let's say, SA or Nigeria puts together Africa Cinema Summit, so we travel there to go hold it? I think
travel there to go and be a part of it.
In as much as we agree NFA has its issues and it has more work to do, it's about time we also commended them when they did the right thing.
So let me come to the NFA itself proper, right? And I've been very vocal about the NFA ever since their inception. I've had people tag me as, how do they put this? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But I've been very opinionated about the NFA and their actions ever since their existence. I've said it several times. our industry even wasn't ready for the NFA, but people felt the need for an NFA. People picketed. People literally like went on picketed at the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture to bring the NFA into existence. But I felt at that time that we weren't ready for the NFA because we seem to have so many issues that we overlook, but we'd rather felt like we needed the NFA. The NFA came and then people are fighting against the NFA, and it's funny because it's like your body feels sick, you take a pill, and then your body starts to fight against the pill. And that's essentially what it's been for the NFA ever since they came into existence. But I've also felt that the NFA themselves are not doing themselves some good with the way they approach some of these things. Personally, I felt like the whole idea of the African Cinema Summit, even from last year, was not well explained to people. And it's not just the summit. I felt like every other thing that the NFA has done over the years, in my opinion, they failed to properly communicate exactly what they are trying to do to the people. I felt like they get too tunnel visioned on a project or anything that they're trying to achieve, that they forget that they are not achieving those things for the NFA, but they are actually supposed to be achieving those things to create what they believe is an enabling film industry. And as a result of that, they need to be vocal in explaining and making the average filmmaker or the average Ghanaian even understand why the NFA is taking that route. And I've been very critical about this. Okay, even for this year's summit, for instance, I felt like the promotion for it was very low. Even looking at the dates that it happened, the announcement or proper social media campaign or whatever for the summit itself was about maybe a week or 2 weeks to the date, as opposed to the previous year where they actually like went all out. But the NFA has made an argument that they knew the people that they were targeting for the summit, so they marketed or promoted the event directly to them. I know people that didn't even know the summit was happening till few days before the summit happened. So how then can they clear their schedules and plan and be present at the summit? Besides that, I've also felt like the NFA, even in the aftermath of the summit, has not really done much to explain what went on at the summit to the average Ghanaian or even the average Ghanaian filmmaker. And I stress on the average Ghanaian filmmaker because the NFA is a Ghanaian establishment. And everything that they do, I think their commitment should be more to the Ghanaian audience than to anybody else, right? And I don't think they've done that. I don't think they have been. Maybe they have, but I don't feel it's enough. And I've spoken about this countless number of times, that the NFA needs to take or adopt an approach where they should not only be in our faces with what they intend to do and what they have done, they should also be in our faces to get us to understand what they are doing and why they are doing that. Because if you do not get people along with you, they are always going to be against you and they are going to be against what you are trying to achieve. For me, that has been one of the biggest shortcomings on the NFA ever since their inception, and I'm hoping that they find a way to make that work. I'm hoping that they find the balance where they are able to effectively communicate exactly what they are trying to do, why they are doing it, and possibly get people to understand the importance of what they are doing. Granted, they cannot convince everybody. There are still going to be people that are going to be like, oh, this thing, they need, this is not important, blah, blah. But it has to be done nonetheless. Otherwise, it's always going to be like the NFA is working in a vacuum and it's not working again in support or in respect to what they continuously say is their attempt at creating an enabling environment for the Ghanaian film industry.
It's about time as a people, we also learned and we unlearned some of the things that are pulling us back as a people. You can be given all the funding, all the infrastructure that you want, but if you fail to learn through these summits and workshops and all that, you fail to grow. Whoever has ears, let them hear.
Wow. Again, big shout out to Kwame Dazi. This is a clip of him on his show, Showbiz A to Z, that happens on Joy 99.7 FM, Saturdays, I think from 3:30 or 3 p.m. to 5 or 6. I'm not really sure. But big shout outs to him for saying it out loud and giving me, should I say, the extra nudge to react to this? Because I was just going to be silent about it, because sometimes I feel like, again, some of us talk too much. Some of us actually worry too much when we shouldn't be worrying about the industry. Yeah, that's how I feel sometimes. But yeah, In summary, everything that Kwame Dazi said in this clip, I totally supported 1000%. I think that we need to adapt an approach to want to have all these conversations regardless of who is organizing it and why they are organizing it. We should be very involved. We should be very intentional. We should be very critical also about all these platforms, all these conversations, throw our weight behind it, and then go out there. I mean, people are pissed about a summit when the idea of a summit is a talk shop. It's conversations. People go there to have conversations. Conversations were had at the African Cinema Summit. If you weren't a part of it, if you weren't there, I guess you have your reasons for not being there. But let's be honest, we do need an event like this. I am hoping that other events pop up, and whilst we are having all these conversations, we still are critical about the importance of why we are having those conversations and what that is supposed to achieve. If we do not have the financial muscle or the technical know-how to set up distribution channels for our films right here in Ghana, and having a summit is going to introduce our space to some investors, why should we be against it? If our summit is going to be attractive to somebody that's looking to expand their business into our territory and we are going to benefit, why should we be against it? The idea of the African Cinema Summit is to advance conversation about cinema. And in this case, it's not just about the physical building or, the structure of a cinema, as in where you go to watch the film, but the whole idea of African films being seen by Africans. Because we are at a deficit, we are at a huge deficit, even from the perspective of the creatives. So yeah, we need to have these conversations. We need to be critical about these conversations. We need to be on the NFA, hold them accountable for everything that they try to deliver, call them out when they are falling short, but also most importantly, throw our weight behind them when we believe or when they have convinced us enough that they are doing something that is indeed helping create an enabling environment for the Ghanaian film industry. That is my hot take on the African Cinema Summit, particularly my hot take on this very important conversation that Kwame Dazi has sparked. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to share, hit the subscription bell and icon if you already haven't, and be on the lookout for the next episode of GH Movie Freaks Hot Take with Tony Asankomah. I am out. Peace.